So I get asked on a pretty regular basis, what is texel density and how should I be using it? So this video will be a quick overview of what it is and how to use it in Modo, and more specifically, how to use the texel density tools in Modo. So when it comes down to what texel density is a tool for art directors and technical artists to set a consistent visual feel to a game world. So it's not about super high res or super low res, but it's more about consistency. So the end result being that when you walk into a world, into a room, into a spaceship, into whatever it is, and you look around, everything looks like it belongs together. It looks like it's part of a cohesive whole. And that's the kind of thing that gets ruined when you have a super high res prop sitting on a low res table and that kind of thing. Like your brain won't accept that as a cohesive world. So texel density is there to help the player to get into the world and to help the art team to express the world in the best way possible. So I find that Naughty Dog are a fantastic studio to reference for this kind of thing. They have a really good feel for texel density. Their worlds are always very believable. So if you look at this screenshot, ignoring the foreground blurriness, that's just the camera depth of field effect. But looking at the midground, the plants, the mold, the trim, everything you see in there looks consistently detailed. There's nothing that's overly dense. There's nothing that's overly blurry. It all hangs together nicely. And here's another quick example. Now pay particular attention to this area right here where you've got the wooden struts, the barrel on top, Drake, and the wall behind him and the foliage above. It all looks consistently detailed, and that's what good texel density looks like, just for reference sake. So we're inside of Modo now, and to give a quick demonstration of how to set up texel density, we'll just do a simple example here. We'll create a flat piece of wall. We'll make it, let's say, 100 by 100, which will make it 1 meter by 1 meter inside of the Unreal Engine. So we'll go with that. There's a 1 meter wall chunk. Now to get to the texel density tools, you go to the UV section and click on the texel density button. Click that once and then drag it off. And that'll give you a floating window that'll just hang there the whole time, and you can use it all throughout the session. So when you're setting up your texel density inside of Modo, there's a couple of values that need to get set up, and it's not 100% clear what these mean until you start to work with it. So the first thing we need to do is give Modo a texture size. Now this doesn't mean that every texture in the game needs to be the same size, but it gives Modo a reference point for packing islands and that kind of thing, and you'll see what I mean here in a second. So we're going to tell Modo that our texture size is 1024. That's a pretty standard size. Actually, it's kind of small these days, but we'll go with 1024 for now. So that's the image size. Now the texel density, this is where we tell Modo the ratio of units to pixels on the texture. So I always set this to pixels because I find that easiest to work with. And we'll say, for easy reference, we'll say 100 units in the game world, which we just said, this thing is 100 by 100, which is 1 meter by 1 meter when you're inside of Unreal Engine. Just keep that in mind. So I'm going to say that 100 units covers 1024 pixels. So with that ratio set up, what that means is that this 1 meter by 1 meter block should be exactly one texture tile. And that's the general ratio that will get applied to everything if I stay consistent with these values. So once you have that set up, you want to select your UV island and hit one of the apply buttons. Now what that's going to do is Modo's going to take that ratio that you set and look at the texture size and rescale the island accordingly. So if I tell it to apply, it bumps the island up this big, and you can see that is exactly fills my 0 to 1 space, because that's what I said. I have a 1K texture and 100 units covers 1K. Boom, so it fills the whole space. For example purposes, let's say that I told Modo that I had a a 2K texture, but I still kept this same ratio. You hit apply, drops down to half size because now I can fit 4 of those onto the texture and maintain this same ratio. If I go smaller, then it gets weird. Then I apply it and it's like, when Modo's like, well, I can only get half of that wall onto one texture size or onto one texture tile. So if I throw a 512 texture onto this wall, it's going to tile twice, horizontally and vertically. But so you'll have to play around with that a little bit to see how that feels, but that's the general mechanics of it. And this is really helpful if you have a prop that you've already unwrapped, or you change the texel density later, let's say, that kind of thing, and you've got a whole bunch. Let me just make a few duplicates of this thing and we'll edit it out and make them, some different sizes and things, and just try to pretend we have these UV islands and they're all. So when it comes to having an existing prop like this, what you need to do is, open your prop up and select the UV islands. Make sure your ratio is set up correctly, and then hit the Apply Overall button. Now, Apply Overall sets all the UV islands to be the same to match the texel density that you specified. And it's done that now. You can see we still have this one piece that's going 0 to 1, 0 to 1, but then we have these other pieces that are they're outside the 0 to 1 space now, but they are at the correct density. Now, if this is something you want to texture uniquely, that means that these pieces are going to have to move on to move off to their own texture or something. And it's just, that's just the realities of working with a set texel density. Now, to be truthful, most times in games, for tiling textures, this is easy because it doesn't matter where my islands fall. But for uniquely unwrapped props, sometimes you have to eyeball things and just be like, well, that looks pretty close and that kind of thing. And I'll show you that here in a second. So for a quick demonstration of these concepts, here's a quick little scene I put together. Here's just a shelf with some objects sitting on it. Now to see the current, these objects are all separated, and you can see they're unwrapped. So over here on the left-hand side there. So they're all unwrapped uniquely. So let's start with this tabletop. And the quickest way to visualize your texel density is to pull down this viewport option and go to UV textures and pick something like the medium texture. And then you have to enable it. But once that's on there, Modo throws on some, a square texture that you can see what's going on with your UVs. Actually, let's pick a different one. Let's go with large. That might be easier to see on the video. So you can see we've got some stretching and things like that, but that's easily fixed. If I just go into that object, grab this, let's relax that out a little bit just to get a better unwrap and a more even density, and then I'll repack that. Okay. So even looking at this, you can see that we do have some texel density problems. The density on this vase is smaller than what's on the table because these squares are larger than these squares and that kind of thing. So to even all that out, that's where texel density comes into play. So I'll select the table. I just tell it to apply the texel density. Okay, the table looks pretty good. I'll select the vase and apply it to that as well. Now you see how much that shrunk inside of here because it doesn't need all of this 1024 space. It only needs this much to match the tabletop. And you can see if I get in here, these squares are all identical in size. So you can see pretty much what the pattern will be. We'll apply that there, and we'll apply it to the sphere as well. So with everything at the same texel density, you can see we have a nice and even distribution of squares on the UV map, and that will translate to whatever your texture is you put on here. Now we do have a problem because this is game art, and I can't have a vase that's sitting in the middle of a texture like this with a bunch of dead UV space around it. That's just not going to ship. So generally what you will do, or one thing you can do, well, there's two options, right? Sorry, I'm waffling a little bit, but there's two options. You can either give that vase a smaller texture, say we give it like a 512 or a 256 or something, and so it maintains the texel density, but it's not wasting texture space. Now the problem with that is the classic problem of when now you've got a whole bunch of little textures, and the engine's constantly swapping out textures when it's rendering, and that's slowing everything down. The more palatable solution is to put them onto an atlas texture, which basically means packing multiple props onto one texture. And we'll do that here in a second. Okay, so for our final thing, we're gonna merge these props onto the same texture. So let's just, we'll select all three of them, and I'll tell Modo to go ahead and pack them. Now that's obviously not an optimal pack, but whatever, it's good enough for demonstration purposes. Now that actually comes out not bad, but you can see now that those three objects, if they were used together pretty often, you could have them on one texture and it would be efficient. Those are the kinds of decisions you need to get used to making when you're an environment artist or a prop artist. Now obviously the texel density is not correct because I haven't actually set it. I just did a default Modo pack. So if I go up here, all my settings are there, so I hit the apply overall button. You can see it all kind of shrunk down a little bit. And that tells me that there's still too much texture space going on, but it's an improvement, right? Let's for the fun of it, scale the vase up. So it needs more texel density now. And I hit that button again. Now they're all this big. And I repack it so it knows about the size, and then I apply overall. Now you see that my pack of these three props, although it's perfectly even with the tabletop and everything looks great, they're sticking outside of the 0 to 1 space. And this is where you kind of have to fudge it sometimes. So in this case, I would just simply grab all of these and tell Modo to fit it in there, just kind of put it back in, and it's close enough. And close enough is kind of a catchphrase with game art. As long as it looks reasonable, it's fine. You don't go too far outside the bounds and don't scale things too much, but you can fudge it in and out a little bit as you need to. And yeah, I think that covers that. So I think that about covers texel density for today. When you're shipping a game, there's a lot of realities that creep in. Like I'm talking about the ideal here in this video. The reality is that generally when you're shipping a real game, there's LODs that come in because things aren't fitting into memory, and so certain textures are getting flagged for being mipped down, for example, or textures are getting merged because of again, memory issues. Or the level designers are taking some of the props and they're scaling them up or scaling them down, and they're throwing off the texel density ratio of the scene and that kind of thing. So you're rarely going to get it 100% perfect, but the goal is to get as good as you can. And generally in game art, as much as I hate to admit it, a lot of it is eyeballed, but that's just the realities of production. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. There's more of these videos coming, obviously. And if you like the video, hit the like button. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.